So welcome. So I was thinking, such a beautiful, wonderful day out there. And I even love the snow. I thought the snow was absolutely beautiful. And we all care so much about the earth. And so it's so wonderful to have this program today about the environment. And of course, Earth Day will be coming up in April. And so you'll have lots of notice about that. We'll have somebody talking in a little bit about something that you could do on Earth Day if you'd like to. I know a lot of us are getting vaccinated and able to be out and about more. So that's also wonderful. The earth is, for me, that's why I moved to Sedona, because I love to be outside. It's my favorite thing in life. It's the thing that brings me healing. And we all become sad. I become sad, and I'm sure you all do too, when horrible, devastating things happen, like the fires in California. And that's why we fight so hard to make sure that our environment is protected. And we can learn from other people, just like we do in our lives in many different ways. I always take ideas from other people and implement them for Democrats of the Red Rocks. Oh, I'm Kathy Rutherford, the president, if you don't know me. And we can do the same thing with things that are happening in other states. So we'll have a comparison today between what's happening with environmental legislation and just things that are happening with environmental justice, maybe you can call it, in the state of Arizona and also in the state of California. So it's going to be a great program. So welcome. I did want to say that we have lost another member this month, Klaus von Stutterheim. We've lost him and we're really sad and we will miss him. He was a great activist. He was really busy with Democrats of the Red Rocks. I'm sure a lot of you saw him at our breakfast when we were able to meet in person. He was the one that used to go around and sell raffle tickets to people. And he was also very involved with the Democratic Perspectives, the radio program. And so we're really sad that we have lost him. Our two main speakers today, and we'll introduce them in a little while, but Sandy Bahr is the person that will talk about the perspectives from Arizona. And then Ellen's son, Matt, I'm not sure I wrote his last name down correctly, so I won't say it, but she'll introduce him in a little while. We're going to start, though, by hearing from Beverly Henigan. And if I said your last name incorrectly, Beverly, you can correct me. But Beverly lives in Cottonwood, and she's been an activist since the 60s in civil rights, women's rights, and climate change. She has been active in many groups, from the NAACP to the NAZCCA, NAZCA as they call it, which is Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance. As a retired teacher, she knows the value of educating and informing, which is the stated vision of NAZCA, to inform the public of the existential climate crisis we now face. So Beverly is going to tell us about a really cool activity that she is coordinating for Earth Day.
Hi everybody. I know some of you, not all of you, but it's nice to talk with you. On Earth Day 2021, which is April 22nd, our group has decided to have a car parade from Sedona to Clarkdale. We're calling, this is a shout out for electric vehicles or hybrid cars, because we have one so far, which is not enough for a parade. Anyway, and we're going to start from Sedona we're going to gather at Posse Grounds at 10 a.m., drive through West Sedona to Old Town, where we're going to pause at the new EV charging station behind City Hall. And then we're going to continue on to Clarkdale and stop at the Clarkdale parade, or Clarkdale Park, which is that center square. And so it will be from 10 a.m. till noon. We are welcoming any and all cars, EV and hybrid, to join us in this parade. Mayor Prudhomme Bahr from Clarkdale is going to read a proclamation at the Clarkdale Park, which the City Council is going to be preparing on April 13th. So if you are at all interested, I will post my Gmail account in the chat room, and please just give me a shout out and we'll talk and figure something out. It's April 22nd from 10 a.m. till noon, starting in Sedona and moving on through Cottonwood to Clarkdale. So in honor of Earth Day.
Thanks, Beverly. And as Toby said, I do want to acknowledge all the wonderful work that NASCA has done and is doing. They have become a really strong organization in all of northern Arizona to help with advocating for climate, sensibility, right? That's what we want. We want to make sure that our legislators and everyone else are thinking about how their laws and their decisions affect the climate. So thank you so much for all of your hard work. And what we'll do, if you're on our email list, we will send out an email about this so that you have it in writing. So Shelley, you could take note of that and at some point send out an email. If you're not on our email list yet, Shelley will put a link in the chat and you can sign up for our email list. We give a lot of great information out. Shelley's been putting out information recently about the COVID vaccines because sometimes it's a little hard to figure out when you can actually sign up for that. It shouldn't be that hard, but it's true. So please sign up for our email list. We will get a lot of great information. Okay, next we have Toby Friedman. One of the things that Democrats of the Red Rocks do is we advocate to make sure that the laws that are passed, both at the state and federal level, are things that hold up our democratic values, including the environment. So Toby's going to talk a little bit about her committee. Go ahead, Toby.
So I'm the head of the action committee for DORR, and I know a lot of you are part of it. And one of the things that I'm doing is request to speak, but today I'm going to talk about the action committee. So if you're not on the action committee, I'll put my name and email in the chat when I'm finished, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. And what we're doing is pretty easy. It probably involves 5 minutes of your time. And I send out an email every week, and it is information from Mick Jordahl, who has researched all of the bills that are going on in our United States, in the federal government. And he writes a little blurb about it, and he writes a script about it. And then we put down Senator Kelly Sinema, Representative O'Halloran's phone number, and we ask you to call them about what the action is for that week. So let me tell you a little bit about the actions that we've had, just to interest you. By the way, raise your hand if you're part of the action call committee. Yeah, so there's a lot of people who are part of that. And it's so the Voting Rights Act, the SB1 for the people, is one of the things that we're encouraging people to call about. Another thing that we're asking people to call about is Justice in Policing Act. And these federal bills, when they come up and when they're in the news, that's when we call. That's when we encourage Kelly Sinema and O'Halloran to vote for them. Sometimes we ask them we thank them for what they've done. So when the COVID relief bill was passed, we asked people to thank our senators and representative for it. One of the other bills that we talk about is the $15 minimum wage. We tried to encourage that. I think it's going to be on the infrastructure bill, but that's just a feeling that I have. They'll bring it back then. The filibuster, we asked people to call. We've been very successful in convincing Sinema maybe to come to our side for the filibuster bill. One of the ways that we're doing that is we are asking her to head committees, and when the bills don't pass, she's like, oh, I guess we need the filibuster. Well, that's what we're thinking, and we hope she's thinking that way. Justice in Policing Act, maybe that's your issue. We're going to be calling our senators and representatives about that. Regulate assault weapons. One of the things that we do is thank, as I said, thank people, and O'Halloran has been passing these House bills about tribal bills and land issue bills, and we try to thank him. That isn't usually what our call is about, but well, as long as we're calling him, we want to thank them too. Another thing we're doing is GOSAR, the big lie. He's supporting big lie, and we're calling him out on that. So that hasn't been the biggest focus, but we will throw in something about GOSAR if it's in the news and we feel it can reach people. And then at the end, there'll be the infrastructure bill, which I believe the Democrats will pass. So if you'd like to get an email, just let me know. I'll put your name on my contact list. As I said, I send it out maybe once a week. It's easy. The phone number is there. By law, they have to document that you've called. So that's good. It's better than an email. It's better than Twitter, but you can put it on an email, Twitter, anywhere else that, social media, anywhere else that you'd like. But we want these documented. We want to make sure that our voices are heard. And so far they have been. There was one email we sent out and the whole state sent it out. It is coordinated a little bit with the state of Arizona, and 600-700 people called that day, and they couldn't get through, but people were able to leave messages. So anyways, thank you in advance if you take part in that. So that's my spiel for today.
So Toby, if you can put your email in the chat, that would be great. And thank you for all your hard work on that. When you get the email about those action calls, they give you a script, they give you information. So when you make the phone call, you've already been informed about what to talk about. So it makes it really easy. So please sign up, because of course, the more voices that our legislators hear, the more they will be affected by the fact that we want them to do a particular thing. So it's really, really important. And of course, also important for the environment. Go ahead, Kathy Kinsella. You're muted though.
Yeah, Toby, did you mention State Bill, House Bill 2481?
No, it's not part of the action call. The action calls are just.
Can I mention it anyway? Can I ask people if they're to be active on that as well? HB 2481 is a bill is sitting in the House, State House, that would actually give authorities back to municipalities for over short-term rentals. So this would be a really important bill, and now would be the time to get in touch with our legislators who are probably not for that. Walt Blackman, Wendy Rogers, and Brenda Barton. But it would allow us to actually use zoning to be able to restrict where any new short-term rentals could or could not go. And it would actually also require licensing. So it would be an important bill. So I'd like to urge people, when you're getting in touch with legislators, to please weigh in on HB 2481 in favor of that. It's been put forth sponsored by Representative Kavanaugh out of the Scottsdale area. So he's a Republican, so he's actually got some bipartisan support on this. If it could get out of Rules Committee where it's stuck, it actually could pass. So please, if you have a couple of minutes, take the time to weigh in on that important bill for Sonoma.
Okay. And if you'd like to be part of the request to speak, even though it's at this point slowing down, I'll put you on our list, and then next year you can get on to the state legislature and you can request to speak, which you don't speak. You speak through checking some little boxes, so it's really easy. We meet on Monday together and do it together, and we have one-on-one if you need help with Shelley. She's been so wonderful leading those meetings and helping. Thank you, Shelley. And thank you to Mick Jordal, who's put out all of those federal bills for us. He's really doing a good job, and I do want to again give him credit for doing that.
So Kathy, do you know what stage that bill is in? Can you do it through request to speak, or do you have to call or email your legislators? You're muted again. Yeah.
No, you can't use request to speak with this one because it's stuck in the Rules Committee. So you need to either send in an email or make a phone call or write a letter.
Okay.
I would recommend phone calls or email, because this could change quickly or die quickly if it doesn't move. It has to get moved out of rules.
Okay. All right, so we have one more announcement. We have a film club. Frankie Reamer and Mick Jordahl started that, and it's been a really strong group and people are really enjoying it. So Frankie is going to tell us about the upcoming film club, which I think will be really interesting.
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. I'll just be a second. So we meet maybe once a month, once every 3 weeks. Our next conversation is tomorrow. We're going to watch, well, people will watch and then we'll be talking about tomorrow, Minari, which is the Oscar nominated film about a Korean immigrant family. We're coupling that with House of Sand and Fog, which is an older movie about a struggle over a house between an immigrant family and an American woman. So if you want, you can look at the DORR webpage for the email address to send to me, and we'll put you on the Zoom list. So it's a great group. We have really interesting conversations. It's one of the few venues where we can talk about issues. So if you have some time and like film, join us.
What time do you meet on Friday?
We meet on Fridays at 5
Thanks.
for an hour to an hour and a half.
Yeah, and the DORR website is really easy, but I put it in the chat. It's democratsoftheredrocks.org. And all the information about the film club is on there and Frankie's email is on there. So you can let her know and then she'll send you the Zoom link. It's a great group. I encourage you to join. Thanks, Frankie. Okay, now we're going to move to our regular program and I'm going to turn it over to Ellen Ferreira and she is going to invite our guest speakers. And thank you so much for being here, our guest speakers. And you're muted.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Great to see you. Several months ago, the DORR board did a survey of all members asking them what are they most interested in? What would they like to see programs on? And after candidates, which people seem to really love to hear from, the next thing by far was environmental things, sustainability, climate action, that kind of thing. So today we are bringing you something environmentally related. We thought about what would be a good angle to approach this from, and we thought it would be really interesting to hear what are the obstacles that were being faced at the Arizona State Legislature. What have we not been able to do? What can't we do in the future because either the feds or the Arizona legislature is preventing us from doing that, versus what could actually happen in a state where the legislature is blue and they are very motivated and care a lot about the environment. So we have speakers today from Arizona and California. Sandy Bahr was recommended to me by Peggy Chaikin. Peggy is my climate guru. If I need any questions answered, I go straight to Peggy and she gives me advice. And Peggy said, Sandy Bahr, she is the heavy hitter in terms of environmental policy for the state of Arizona. So Sandy has agreed to speak to us today. She is president of the Grand Canyon chapter of the Sierra Club and a heavy hitter. Sandy monitors and advocates on environmental protection and anything environmental for the state of Arizona. So she follows the legislature, she follows the Corporation Commission, she follows the state agencies and the federal agencies. And she's been working here in this area a long time. She's a native of Michigan, but she's been in Arizona for the past 30 years. So she really knows our water issues. She knows it all. So Sandy, if you would please address the group, we would appreciate it. And then we are going to have our California speaker. So Sandy, I'm guessing about 15 to 20 minutes. And what we're going to do is hold your questions, put them in the chat. And once both speakers have finished, then we will be able to, then we'll address the questions. So Sandy, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I did prepare a few slides. Is it okay if I share those now?
Sure.
Okay.
Hold on 2 seconds.
Oops.
Okay, you should be able to do it now.
Let me try again. There we go. All right, now, why are they not popping up? Hold on. Let me try that again. All right. Sorry. This doesn't seem to be coming up. Oh, here we go. Why is it? Oh, sorry. It was the first one. That's why I couldn't see it. Okay. All right, let me get this started. Here we go. Very good. I'm going to move you all over. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. And again, thank you for inviting me to be here today. And sadly, I guess get to focus on the kind of the negative aspects of Arizona right now, and that's the Arizona legislature. But I will say that there is a lot of opportunity to make a difference there with the current legislature. But I guess more importantly, that, you know, with just a few seats, the legislature could change dramatically. So I know that's something that you all are aware of, and I won't talk too much about that today. So I'm going to focus on what's happening and then also what you can do about it. And I will seek to stay within that 15 to 20 minute time frame, but someone can cut me off if I exceed it. Thank you. All right. So what is the Arizona legislature doing? Well, first of all, let's talk about what it's not doing. It's not doing anything to address the climate crisis, water quality, air quality, public health, environmental racism and justice. They certainly aren't making it easier to participate in government. So that is what it's not doing. There were many good bills introduced on these issues, but they did not get hearings, and they're all dead right now. They have been seeking to undermine clean energy, including the clean energy rules at the Corporation Commission. Now, these two bills, House Bill 2248 and 1175, are dead for now. As anyone who has watched the legislature knows, nothing is really dead until the legislature adjourns, and we have a little ways to go on that. So I think we need to stay vigilant on this issue. I will add that there's a lot of work to do on getting these rules through at the Corporation Commission, and I can address that perhaps in the Q&A session. But there's been an all-out attack this session to try to prohibit any regulation of carbon emissions at the Corporation Commission. And this is after the legislature several years ago already prohibited the Department of Environmental Quality from doing anything to reduce greenhouse gas emissions unless the legislature specifically tells it to. So really the wrong direction and out of step with the country and our state. They also are seeking what I've been calling bad neighbor bills. Some also call them right to harm bills, but they are bills to make it more difficult to challenge these huge concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. It's industrial agriculture. These are not your family farm. And in this case, they are trying to limit any nuisance actions. And nuisance is in the law and in common law in order to address things that there aren't specific regulations for, but are very important sometimes with odor, for example. In the case of Hickman's eggs, the fly situation is apparently ridiculous, and people nearby can't enjoy and use their property. And so this one preempts local ordinances relative to the regulation under nuisance, and also tries to chill any challenges by awarding costs and fees to any prevailing party. So this is really advantaging the big guys against the little guys. And Senate Bill 1448 is moving. It passed out of committee on Monday and will go to the floor of the House probably early next week. There were two other bills that did die. We had enough opposition that they have kind of stopped pushing them. But this one looks like they are really going to try and push it through. Also, you probably, or you may have heard that under the Trump administration, there were a lot of bad moves under the Trump administration, but one was to narrow the coverage of the Clean Water Act. And so most of Arizona waters right now are not covered by the Clean Water Act. House Bill 2691 would set up a program in theory to address some of the gaps in coverage, but it is so weak that we and others think that it is worse than no program at all. It has provisions that say our protections can't be any more stringent than the federal government, which I think creates some problems, at least in the near term. Excludes all ephemeral waters, and those are the waters that flow when it rains. Excludes outstanding Arizona waters as a protected Arizona water. So outstanding Arizona waters are the ones that have anti-degradation requirements, and the state can't permit an action that would permanently degrade the water quality. Doesn't address dredge and fill, and there is really no significant public review and comment for the standards or other provisions, the listing and other provisions in the bill. So that bill is going to the Senate floor, and we just sent out an alert yesterday on this, asking people to ask their senators to vote no. We need to have a better foundation to work from than this extremely weak program. And then Sierra Club spends a lot of time on democracy issues, and we can't have a healthy environment without a healthy democracy. And so I wanted to mention some of the voter suppression bills. There are others, but these are 4 bills that are moving, that we have been focusing on, and all of them are targeting early voting. And because voters in 2020 and 2018 used the permanent early vote or early voting more frequently, and of course the legislature did not like the outcome of some elections, and so now they are seeking to make it very difficult to stay on the permanent, or more difficult to stay on the permanent early voting list, and more significantly making it more difficult to vote early, closing the amount of time, saying ballots have to be postmarked by the Thursday before the election. 1713 would require an envelope inside an envelope, and then you would have to put additional ID in there. In some cases, you would have to photocopy a utility bill or something similar that you got within the last 90 days, obviously intended to disqualify more ballots. So all of these bills are in play right now in the House of Representatives. They've already passed out of the Senate. And then, of course, they're attacking our vote, right to vote, but also direct democracy by making it more difficult to put things on the ballot, and also to erode the Voter Protection Act provisions. And these are 4 referrals. There are also a couple of bills that would erect some roadblocks as well, including one that would require that you either, if you're going to sign a petition, you have to either read the short description or have it read to you. And if the circulator thinks that you didn't, they would just cross out your signature. And so I think it's a pretty bad provision, because of course, what if you read the whole measure and you came prepared to sign? You shouldn't have to sit there and read the description. So anyway, it's very disrespectful bill from the legislature. These other bills require supermajorities, one for tax increases, the other would require a 60% supermajority to approve any ballot measures, statutory, constitutional, any of them. And then the single subject provision would just make it very difficult to do a comprehensive ballot measure. You would have to really narrow the aspects and likely have to do multiple measures to accomplish one thing. And then SCR 1034 really blows a hole in the Voter Protection Act, and we're very concerned about that. There also has been a little bit of this, not as much as some sessions, attacking public and tribal lands. 2702, which is a bill Representative Fincham introduced, would require the governor and legislature to approve any sale or transfer of private property to the federal government that would remove it from the tax rolls. Of course, this ignores all the other benefits that we get from public lands and would interfere with transactions relative to tribal governments, but also is unconstitutional. I mean, you really can't do that. So we are hoping that this one is going to die. It seems to be stalled in the House, so hopefully it will die. And then one positive thing, the legislature is seeking to fund the Arizona State Parks Heritage Fund. There are a couple of different bills in play, 2127 and 1384. And they appropriate funding for the State Parks Heritage Fund, which was totally eliminated when Jan Brewer was governor and was brought back a couple of years, but didn't have any funding with it. So it's a little strange to call it a fund when there are no funds. So we're hoping that there will be at least something that goes to the State Parks Heritage Fund this year. And that helps to fund trails and parks and protection of cultural resources. So what can you do to help with stopping these bills and help promote that positive one? I think you probably already know some of this, but I have hot links in this slideshow and I can share it afterwards, but we have some alerts posted that are easy to use, so you can email your legislators, but also calling about these bills is important too. I would also add, today there is a bill up, House Bill 2309, that targets protesters. I think it really attacks our First Amendment rights and is racially motivated, and would really, because of the Black Lives Matter protests. And so I hope people will weigh in on that one too. I didn't create a slide, but I just wanted to mention it because I'm still hoping to testify on it a little bit later this morning. And you can sign up for our legislative alerts. They go out every Friday, sometimes Saturday morning if it's just been a day where we couldn't quite get it out. And they make it easy for you to take action via email, use the request to speak system, which it sounds like you all have been utilizing a lot anyway. And it gives you a heads up on which committee hearings to watch for which bills. If you do want to speak, and I know that request to speak, a lot of people get intimidated because they think they will have to, but of course, as was noted, you don't. But I did want to encourage people to speak because right now you can do so remotely. And so you don't have to drive to the Capitol to do it. and there's an extra step involved. But one of the things that I think the legislature has taken advantage of this session is there aren't as many regular people voices. There are a lot of lobbyists and, advocates that are part of organizations, but not as many individuals telling their stories. And so I just wanted to encourage that. I know there's just next week of committees and then appropriations the following week. But perhaps if you've been holding back, you might want to think about that. And yeah, come to the Capitol virtually for now. Join us, speak up, and we're holding questions, so I will wrap there and take your questions later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sandy. That was great. That was very interesting. And I'm so glad that the Sierra Club is broad enough that it is going against those voter suppression bills, which we are all so adamantly opposed to. It's just, it's all a domino effect. And so we appreciate the work the Sierra Club is doing about that. So, okay, so there's a little positive news. That's good. Thank you. Our next speaker has been into sustainability his whole life, even before sustainability, I think, was a word. I know this because I'm his mother, and I have to just tell you a little story. When Matt was about 8 years old, he had a lemonade stand out in front of our house. And I asked him, what are you going to do with the money that you earn? And he said, I'm sending it to the Environmental Defense Fund. So this is the kind of household Matt was raised in. And I think this has been his trajectory all of his life. His first job out of college was a volunteer job with something called Heal the Bay in Santa Monica. And then he went on to work for the city of Santa Monica, doing everything environmental from that affected the city buildings and electric car stations in the garages, things like that. And then he was hired by Governor Jerry Brown's administration to be the Deputy Secretary for Sustainability, which was a great job. And he moved to Sacramento, which is where he now lives. He is now in charge of, or one of the people in charge of, CalRecycles, which his son explained to me is helping recycle cows. But actually, CAL stands for California Recycles and has nothing to do with cows. You read his bio in the introduction to this promotion, so the promotion to this meeting. So I just want to introduce my son, Matthew Henigan, who I am so proud of, who was born, actually, his birthday is April 23rd, the day after Earth Day. And I do believe that this was my fault because the delivery was so long. If it had been a quicker delivery, he would have been born on Earth Day. So that would have been so totally appropriate, but my bad, sorry. Anyway, Matt, let's hear from you. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mom, for, that could have been worse. Thank you. And thank you all for inviting me. And thank you, Sandy, for your hard work at the Arizona Legislature. That was just a catalog of horrors and hard to listen to. And so different from the reality here in California. And I think it's valuable for me to see what the rest of the country is dealing with and get out of my California bubble. And I think it's valuable for all of you to see what the possibilities are if your hard work pays off, especially at the state legislature. California managed to weather the Trump administration fairly well because we had our own state policies and a blue state legislature and governor. So, and even on the local level, right, a lot of progress can be made in the blue cities and towns, even in deep red Arizona. So I'll kind of end my presentation with that. So I want to give you a sense of some of the foundational environmental legislation that's allowed California to make the progress that it has. It's going to strike a different tone, I think, than Sandy's presentation. I look forward to a discussion afterwards. So no discussion of California environmental policy would be complete without talking about AB 32, which is California's cap and trade law. So cap and trade is a free market solution to global warming. And in fact, much like Obamacare, I think originated in right-wing think tanks like the Heritage Foundation. The idea is to reduce carbon emissions at the least possible cost. And so if one particular facility can reduce below the requirement inexpensively, but another facility, it would be very expensive to even reach, the standard, they can trade emission credits. And so the reduction happens at the least cost place. There's a market, just like there's a market for stocks, and that cap falls every year. And so we know we're only issuing enough emission credits that will necessarily hit the targets in the climate plan. Now that was challenged because it is a tax, and Sandy mentioned one of the bills in the Arizona legislature would require a 2/3 majority in the legislature for any new tax. We have that in California, and it is a nightmare. And many good policies don't get through, not because they can't get a majority, but because they can't get 2/3. So there is a gigantic fight when the initial 10-year run of cap and trade ran out. The market crashed for these credits because people lacked confidence that it would be renewed. And only through some very aggressive horse trading and earmarking and political horse trading that cost one legislator a recall, were we able to reauthorize AB 32 with a 2/3 majority and cement that as a tax. That was unclear if the courts would rule it a tax or not. So AB 32 is not the only climate policy. People think, well, once you've capped emissions, that's the whole job. But actually, the emission reductions from cap and trade are only part of it. Ellen, I have a slide that shows where the rest of it is supposed to come from. Auctions of the credits bring in billions of dollars every year. And so the other slide is the one I'm referring to. And you can see cap and trade is a big chunk of it, but tackling, forest health and landfill emissions, high global warming potential gases like from air conditioners, low carbon fuel, transportation fuels, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and clean cars all make up a mix. So cap and trade is not the be all and end all. So, okay, that's enough of that slide. I just wanted to give you a sense of where the emission reductions are coming from. Now, the problem with cap and trade, or the objection to cap and trade, is that it does not necessarily hold every facility to a very tight standard. Remember, we talked about that facility that's heavily polluting but very expensive to upgrade, they can just buy credits. And if you happen to live next door to that facility, that is not a great outcome for you and your community. And so the environmental justice community was extremely vocal against cap and trade. In order to placate that concern, 25% or 33% of the funds, billions of dollars, must be spent on programs that benefit disadvantaged communities. And so a lot of thought has gone into defining a disadvantaged community. And we have a tool called CalEnviroscreen that looks at health outcomes and pollution burdens of neighborhoods, and a disadvantaged communities in the lowest 25%. And so because of cap and trade, billions of dollars are flowing into these communities. But we do still get a lot of opposition from the environmental justice folks who want to see their plant next door to their community reduce its emissions, firm and enforced by the law, which is not something cap and trade does. And the monies are essential for programs here at CalRecycle, rebates on electric cars. Our high-speed rail gets almost all its funding from cap and trade. So the other slide I'll bring up briefly are Governor Brown's 5 pillars of climate policy. And we'll just go through those because it's a nice succinct way to talk about it. So up in the upper corners, you can see 2 people I hold in equal esteem. The person who put this slide together was a big Jerry Brown fan. And Jerry Brown did meet Pope Francis before the environmental encyclical was issued, before the Paris Climate Accord. And so I think they're in good company. So, and the person who put this slide together clearly has a good sense of humor. So yeah, I don't object to that. So these 5 pillars, I'll just read them off here before I go into more detail, if I can see them. I see the 50% less petroleum by 2030. That's a lofty goal. The renewable portfolio standard, that's a percentage of electricity that has to come from renewable energy, a doubling of energy efficiency, tackling short-lived climate pollutants, and healthy soils and forests. Okay, so you may screenshot at that, or we can come back and put it up during the question and answer, but I'm done with it now if you are. So just going through those, 50% less petroleum, this is a tough one. In fact, it was included in major climate legislation, SB 350, and had to be taken out. The bill was going down to defeat. So I do want to stress, just because we've got Democratic majorities in the Senate and Assembly, as well as the governor's office, that does not mean we get everything we want. There is a very powerful group of moderate Dems. They're called the Mod Dems, and they're from purple districts, often districts that have oil drilling. California has a significant oil industry. So Bakersfield, actually downtown parts of Los Angeles, like Inglewood and Crenshaw, and a significant amount of jobs come from oil. And so there are enough of these moderate Democrats who are barely hanging on to their seat and have very difficult elections every year. They become the opposition, essentially, on a lot of these environmental bills, because they don't want to be painted with too broad a brush as very liberal Democrats in their district. And they succeeded in buckling to the Western States Petroleum Association, is a very powerful lobby, and we're able to get that out. Jerry Brown did include 50% reduction in petroleum use in an executive order. We were able to take that on administratively through executive action through the executive branch. And so you'll see the scoping plans and the climate plans all include a reduction of petroleum, but it's not actually in the law. So the way this is accomplished is with a low carbon fuel standard. It was introduced in an executive order from Arnold Schwarzenegger, who also signed AB 32. So that's the powerful, if you're going to get elected as a Republican in California, you have to be pretty moderate. And environment is a winning issue even for Republicans here. And it says the intensity of your motor fuel has to drop by 10% by 2020. So how do you reduce the carbon intensity of a gallon of gas? You blend ethanol, or you sell other alternative fuels. And so it also created a tradable permit scheme where someone who makes biodiesel and sells 100% biodiesel can separate the environmental attributes of that and sell that to Chevron or Texaco or Exxon. And they can claim that their gasoline is therefore less carbon intensive. And it creates a huge revenue stream for alternative fuel producers. So my previous role was Deputy Secretary of Sustainability for state operations. And we were moving the state fleet, which is 40,000 vehicles, to renewable fuel. There's a renewable diesel is made from palm oil and waste tallow and other waste fish oil in Singapore, and is being produced domestically now. At the time, not so much. There's a plant in LA that makes it now. It turns out it's actually cheaper than regular diesel. because the revenue the refinery can get from selling their emission credits or their low carbon fuel credits. So it's a fantastic policy. It does distort the market in that you can get much more revenue from renewable fuel that's sold for transportation rather than for heating, for example. So if you make natural gas, renewable natural gas, and sell it to a bus operator, it's worth more than putting it in the pipeline for homes, which doesn't make much sense from a climate perspective, but it has really pumped up the market for renewable fuels. The second pillar is the Renewable Portfolio Standard. This is a big part of SB 350, and it says that 33% of California's electricity has to come from renewable, excluding large hydro. So if you include large hydro, it's higher than that, but because of the fish and the not great legacy of large hydro plants, we don't count that. And 50% by 2030. We blew through the 33% requirement 2 years early. The plummeting price of solar has actually made it more cost effective for utilities to buy. And they're putting gas power plants out of business. The Department of Water and Power actually owns a gas power plant that they never turn on because they can't get the prices that they need on the market in order to run this plant. Because the marginal cost of operating a solar plant is zero, right? If the sun is out, you're going to sell that electricity at any price. And so they're often undercutting the price on the wholesale market of even fossil fuel producers. This has created other problems though. So you mentioned the proceedings at the Corporation Commission. We are doing a similar thing right now. Net energy metering is when your solar panels produce more than you need for your home, you sell it back to the utility. A major incentive to install solar panels was you sell back at the same price you buy. But that puts the utilities in the position of buying retail priced power when really they like to buy wholesale priced power. And so it's been essentially a big subsidy to rooftop solar owners who tend to look like us and the people in this room and not necessarily representative of the diversity of California. And so it's a big public subsidy, or it's a subsidy in the utility world. If you have a zero electric bill, you're not paying anything for the wires that you use to sell your excess power to the grid and that you use to convey nighttime power to you. So you're getting to use the utilities network as a battery for free. And so as more and more people get solar, the prices drop, it makes more economic sense, more customers leave, and they call it the utility death spiral. You'll have a smaller and smaller number of customers who are actually paying to support the infrastructure. So their bills will have to go up. So it makes more sense to get solar and you get fewer customers and those bills go up and they call it a death spiral for the utility. So there is a lot of work on, what is the value of reliability? What's the value of the grid and charging people? And this net energy metering 3.0 proceeding could really take the rug out from under rooftop solar in California. I wouldn't bet that will be the outcome, but there's definitely strong forces at the Public Utility Commission pushing for that. I work at CalRecycle now. We're looking at recycling solar panels. Solar panels last 20 to 25 years, after which they are basically worthless. They don't have enough valuable metals in there to make it worthwhile. They're bulky, could be hazardous, chemicals in there and metals. And when you think about these gigantic solar farms, where are all these panels going to go? No one, when you buy a television in California, you pay $6. It goes into a recycling fund that pays to recycle televisions that are collected. Similar for carpet and mattresses and other where you pay in advance for an advance recycling fee. No one's been paying recycling fees on solar panels or electric car batteries. So that's kind of the next level of policy. We're going to need to endow some type of a recycling system for these just oceans of used solar panels that'll be coming off rooftops slowly at first, but then in a torrent as the years go by. The other problem with high penetrations of renewables is something called the duck curve. So when people wake up in the morning, or when people get home from work, they turn on the lights, they turn on the TV, they start cooking dinner just as the sun starts going down. So you get spiking demand. During the day, we're producing more power than we need. We're selling it to other states. Electricity is abundant. All of a sudden, the sun goes down, the generation drops off, the demand spikes, and you have to ramp up these other power plants extremely fast, faster than they can do. So instead, you have to keep fossil plants running all day. And we're actually curtailing, dumping solar power to keep these solar plants running to even out, to be able to respond to that nighttime peak. So it ends up resulting in higher costs, and it's a real challenge. We need batteries and storage as the answer to this, but recycling those batteries is also something that hasn't been fully figured out yet. Doubling energy efficiency was another pillar that was also in SB 350. You can use the building code for that. I want to highlight building code is something that the locals have control over, at least here in California. So your city, City of Santa Monica was the first in the nation to require solar panels on new construction. You can do that in Sedona or Cottonwood or, or any local municipality. We also have tiers, so you can strengthen energy efficiency, water efficiency requirements for new construction above and beyond the state code. So the way the mechanism for energy efficiency is in California is the utilities are required to create these integrated resource plans. How many kilowatt hours are you going to get from power plants, solar, and from energy efficiency? And those have to be approved by the Public Utility Commission. In order to get those kilowatt hours from energy efficiency, they have to invest in rebates and programs, efficiency programs, rebates. That's ratepayer money. That's money on your power bill that a lot of people can't afford. And what you end up having in California is higher per kilowatt hour costs than the rest of the nation and lower bills, because the outcome of all these programs is you use less electricity. And so you're buying less. And so even though you may see in the news, California electricity twice as expensive as other states. Yeah, but we're using half as much of it and your bill ends up being about the same. Okay, moving along, another pillar that I work on quite a bit now is called short-lived climate pollutants. CO2, once it's in the atmosphere, warms the atmosphere forever, right? Until it gets taken out by a tree or a plant or something. Methane, HFCs, black carbon. Black carbon has a climate effect of a few weeks and then it falls out to the ground. Methane is 83 times more potent than CO2 over 20 years, but it degrades, and after 100 years, it's only 20 times. So that's a quadruple. It drops, which means that cutting methane, HFCs, and black carbon has an instant effect on climate. Right? It's not a delayed effect, and it buys society time. It gives us a little time from the worst impacts of climate change. And so SB 1383 is dominating my world right now because it requires that we divert 75% of organic waste away from the landfill. So we used to put yard waste as alternative daily cover on landfills to keep, flies and seagulls out of there. And just, food scraps from restaurants, paper, you name it. If it's organic, it generates methane when it's buried in the landfill. And yes, there are gas collection systems, but those are optimized for collecting a rich enough stream of methane to be sold as fuel. It's not meant to suck up every last molecule. And so landfills are the third largest, and actually based on new studies, maybe the largest source of methane in California. So the way waste regulation works in California is CalRecycle, a law gets passed, CalRecycle writes regulations on jurisdictions. So every city, all 500 cities and counties have to report that they're in compliance with these laws and offering the programs that we have decided are necessary, we as CalRecycle are necessary to hit this 75% reduction. And so it's mandatory collection of food waste from residences and businesses. There's a requirement that grocery stores and large restaurants donate or have a collection service for edible food, so it's getting refed to people, and so food banks. It's gonna make your garbage bill go up. We're using some cap and trade money. We need 100 new compost facilities, industrial scale compost facilities, to take this influx of food waste. So we have some money, but it's gonna be on your garbage bills. And so, right, this is the problem. It's the death of 1,000 cuts, right? You know, you pay a little extra on your electricity bill, a little extra on your water bill, a little extra on your, and soon enough, we have an affordability crisis and very high poverty rates. You know, when you consider housing prices, California has the highest poverty in the country, and homelessness, and you know, a lot of people are barely getting by, and a few bucks a month on a power bill or garbage bill does make a difference. But we're also tackling this with, you mentioned the feeding operations. The Department of Food and Agriculture is giving away millions and millions of dollars for dairy digesters. So it puts a cover on that lagoon. It ferments that dairy waste into methane, which is then burned for electricity or injected into the pipeline for renewable natural gas. So, you know, there are solutions to these problems. And the last pillar I want to mention is healthy soils. So also Department of Food and Agriculture is using cap and trade funds to subsidize farmers using conservation agriculture, where compost and other techniques are used to sequester carbon in the ground. So the next scoping plan, our Air Resources Board writes a scoping plan. How are we going to get the emission reductions in order to hit the targets? This next one is really going to focus on, the Newsom administration is focused on carbon capture and sequestration. And that can be big machines that pull carbon out of the atmosphere and pump it underground. In fact, that's part of, they call it a just transition for all those oil workers in Bakersfield and in Inglewood. You run the oil infrastructure in reverse, pumping CO2 underground into the same formations that trapped the oil in the first place. But a cheaper and more ubiquitous way to do this is applying compost and biochar and organic materials to the soil, right? The plant grows, takes carbon out of the atmosphere, you plow it under, and it stays there as soil organic material and absorbs water better. So it helps with the drought. It prevents pesticide-laden water from just filtering through sandy soil into the aquifer and impacting the groundwater. We have terrible pesticide contamination in the Central Valley, and the communities, you know, disadvantaged communities dependent on well water, drinking this pesticide water. So the organic material helps with that too. And also forestry practices. We're finding that 1 year of bad fires emits more CO2 than we're saving from all those 5 pillars altogether. And it's not human caused, right? So it doesn't go on the books in the same way, but really it is, because the forests are not managed for sequestering carbon, right? Before, you know, European colonization, the Native Americans managed these forests for game and for medicinal plants and for basket weaving materials, and set controlled burns. And there's you know, journals of early explorers that in the San Francisco Bay, that the hills were just constantly on fire. There's always these small fires and plumes of smoke all over the place. It's just part of the California ecosystem. When we build infrastructure out there that needs protecting, we suppress the fires, the forests get overgrown, and you get these much hotter, much more devastating, much more emissive fires, right? So a little brush fire on the ground level does not put out as much carbon as these, you know, when it gets up into the canopy, it kills the whole tree. And so we're putting resources into controlled burns, they call it fuels treatment, which is, you know, doing with a chainsaw and a bulldozer what the Native Americans would have done with controlled burns. But the problem is it's very expensive, and we need markets for that woody material. So I serve on the advisory committee of the Wood Products Innovation Advisory Council. We've pushed through building codes, right? The idea is to put this wood to good use, to allow for tall wood buildings. So right now, the tallest all wood building you can build is 6 stories. And that's timber frame like you imagine with the studs. Mass timber is a technique where they put those 2x4s together in these giant mass panels that are as strong as concrete and lift them up into place, almost like building Legos. In Europe, they're building skyscrapers out of these things. We just passed building codes to allow 18-story all wood buildings. You know, it's all under drywall, which is inflammable. They've got sprinklers, right? The fire protection. So steel and concrete are incredibly carbon intensive building materials. Now we're displacing those carbon intensive building materials and actually sequestering carbon in the built environment for, you know, 100, 200 years, however long these buildings last. And so that's, you know, you think of loggers as like these environmental villains. Now, your ecosystem may vary. I don't know what treatment regime Arizona forests need, but we got hit with the bark beetle so badly because the forests were so overstocked that the trees couldn't get enough couldn't get enough water, right? When you've got, you know, 50 trees per acre instead of 12, they're competing and none of them can get enough water to fight off the bark beetle and they all die. Having leadership that invests in forest health is important. Okay, I'm getting to the end of my time. I do want to talk a little bit about packaging reform, right? Plastics in the ocean, the birds and the sea turtles are eating it, it's terrible. California is looking at extended producer responsibility. So SB 75, I think it was, geez, what, 1040? I'm sorry, I can't remember the number. Would say manufacturers, you can't sell a product if it's in a packaging that is not recycled in California at a 75% recovery rate. And so you either have to switch to like paper, which is recycled, or you have to start buying that material, right? If you really want to sell juice boxes and they're not being recycled right now, you better buy up bales of juice boxes from the material recovery facilities that process the trash and use it for something and make sure it gets recycled in order to hit that 75% number. So the manufacturers would build that cost into the cost of the product so that they could afford to buy those bales and pay whatever it costs to get them recycled in order to be able to sell their juice boxes, flexible packaging, films, and other non-recyclable plastics. Another way to do that is just charge a fee, right? There's like a penny per fork that goes to CalRecycle, then CalRecycle makes grants for recycling. You could do it either way. We have successful extended producer responsibility bills and programs from those bills for carpet, mattresses, paint, and pharmaceuticals. And the industry, which knows their product best, sets up these recycling networks and handles it much more efficiently than a government program could, in my opinion. And I've seen the success track record of those. I want to call out your electric vehicle parade. I think that's great. California pushes electric vehicles. I've driven a couple of electric vehicles in my day. I'm not in one right now because I'm driving a hand-me-down car. It's a hybrid though. California says to vehicle manufacturers, look, for every one regular car, you have to sell an electric car. And or the ratio changes over time. But so manufacturers like Tesla, who don't sell regular cars, sell those credits to someone like Subaru, who doesn't make electric cars. And that's how they're able to exist in the market. So you can have someone like Fiat selling those Fiat 500s at a loss just because they need the credits to sell their other vehicles. And so it's been a great way to subsidize, there's also rebates paid out of cap and trade money. Before I end, I do want to talk about some things at the local level, just because it might be infeasible to pass some of these policies at the state level. So sustainability in government operations. If your city council is, up for environmental action, switching switching the local fleet to alternative fuels, doing energy efficiency in the buildings. There's an enormous suite of, things that electric vehicle charging stations at all the parks and public facilities to make it more accessible for people to drive electric cars. The building code is often within local control, so that could be mandatory solar. We're also seeing a lot of cities say new homes can't have gas, right? It's very easy to get renewable electricity, renewable natural gas, much less so. And so there's a push for electric stoves, induction stoves, electric heat pump heating, things like that. You can do that at the local building code. I'd also say, here at CalRecycle, we really push the use of rubberized asphalt. So if you know anyone in public works, make sure they're using ground up tires in the asphalt. It makes the asphalt last longer. It's cost effective because your infrastructure lasts longer, and it uses up those waste tires, which are a real problem. And your recycling, your garbage hauling, the franchise agreement that your city has with the garbage hauler, that's completely negotiated by your local government. You could have a SB 1383 compliant garbage, a franchise contract if you wanted to, right? You could follow those California rules just with your local garbage hauler. So those are a few ideas that if you can't get them at the legislature, you can do them locally. So I'm over time. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Matt. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin there. That's a lot of information. Thank you. That's great. I'd love to hear Sandy's comments on what's going on in California, what Matt just shared with us. There are just so many things that you never think about, like recycling of tires and carpets and things like that, and what's making the biggest difference in the environment. Believe it or not, and I think I've told you this, Matt, we are prohibited by state law from doing certain things at the local level. One of them is recycling, not recycling, but single-use plastic bags. We can't ban them. We can't charge single-use plastic bags. The plastic industry has its arms around our state legislature. And so we're restricted by a lot of state controls that California doesn't seem to be impacted by. Okay, let me see. We do have a question here.
Yeah, that law doesn't just preempt on plastic bags. It's on it's the auxiliary containers. So, any of the foam containers, other types of things as well. And I would just add, as far as preemption goes, we also have preempted local government from any bans on expansion of gas, into, so if we want to limit natural gas, I have to put quotes around it, then local government can't do that either. So.
Right, the anti-fracking. Yeah, Governor Brown took a lot of flack for not taking a harder stand against drilling, but the theory is it's the demand for the fuel that you need to reduce.
No, this isn't about fracking. This is about actually the building, restricting like new buildings for gas hookups. That part of it has nothing to do with the fracking part of it, because we don't have gas fracking in Arizona. We have gas, helium fracking, but not natural gas.
That's so interesting.
Any other questions, discussion? Sandy? Oh, here's Kathy. By the way, Matt, we do have 2 city council people on the call. And one of them is Kathy Kinsella.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for such a great presentation. That was so full of information and wonderful ideas, that I want to jump on. But I have a question about the $6 proactive recycling fee paid at point of purchase. How many different goods does that apply to? And is that only in California? Do you know of other states that have that? Is there a way that that could be applied at a federal level? Is there legislation pending that we could push for? I think it's a great idea to start building the funds to pay for recycling and things we need by, proactively. I think it was wonderful.
Absolutely. So there is a group headquartered here in Sacramento called the National Stewardship Action Council that pushes for these product stewardship laws. So this is when the industry runs it. So for example, there's a 35-cent per yard fee on carpet that goes back to a nonprofit run by the big carpet mills. They are in law required to reach a 24% recycling rate, and then that ramps up over time. And if the 35 cents isn't enough, they'll increase it. And they've increased it in the past. So the National Stewardship Action Council, I think, is the best resource for that. Now, our e-waste fee of $6 for a TV only covers video display devices over 4 inches. It's an old law that was designed to deal with CRT televisions and desperately needs to be expanded to include really anything with a battery or a plug, solar panels, but it would be seen as a tax, and we can't get the 2/3 majority for that. So there's a number of bills about battery EPR. EPR, extended producer responsibility, is a way to avoid this tax because it's the industry charging its own customers instead of the government doing the taxing.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, those are really great ideas. I'll look into some of that. I wish if we had, I think your mother probably shared with you as well, that we were unsuccessful in getting our legislative district, the candidates that we wanted into office, who were very friendly toward exactly these types of legislation. So it's so difficult to find the legislators in Arizona to even introduce this forward-thinking legislation, which I'm sure Sandy can attest to and speak to even more. But so many great ideas. With your presentation, do you have any kind of like PowerPoint or any kind of information that you could share with us that to have as a resource guide? Because you had so much information in there. I'd love to be able to point back to it.
Yeah, there was a lot there. I'll just make myself available, let's talk offline and exchange some emails. And here, I'll put my email address in the chat, and you all, feel free to continue the conversation offline.
Thank you.
I have to tell you that Matt used to drive a car that was fueled by cooking oil, and you could smell him coming before you would see him. You would smell French fries. You'd smell French fries before, and you'd say, "Oh, he's almost here."
That's right. Yep, those are the good old days.
All right. Well, this has been great.
So
Sandy?
Ellen, I have a couple of
Okay.
questions, and comments more than anything. Thank you both for being here. Matt, one of the things that your presentation pointed out to me is how complicated this all is, because you charge an extra amount to recycle a mattress that makes that mattress more expensive for people that don't have as much money. There's just all these competing priorities. And I'm just really grateful for the work that you do in California, because it is leading edge, and you're working to figure out these problems as you go, so that other states, when they finally do become bluer, can start doing the same thing. So I want to thank you so much for all of your efforts. It is very complicated, more complicated than I had ever thought. So,
well, Jerry Brown, was very big on international, climate agreements, and he hosted a giant international conference in San Francisco and said, look, if California is the only one that does this, we don't get the results, right? It's completely worthless. And then we've paid all these extra costs and we get no benefit, because global warming is a global thing. So really the whole point of this is to try out the policies so they can be recreated elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. We're all neighbors, right? So the fires that happened in California weren't due to what Californians were or were not doing, other than the forest management. It has to do with the droughts. It has to do with the global climate change that's happening.
Exactly. The hots are getting hotter and the dries are getting drier. And when a hot year and a dry year coincide, we get bad fires.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I have a question for Sandy. You mentioned the Corporation Commission at one point, and I know we got one more person on the Corporation Commission this last year. What is your take on the balance and the ability of more progressive thinkers on that commission to actually get some things to happen?
Yeah, well, we had hoped for a little one more seat and it would have been a little clearer. But I will say, I think it is one of the statewide bodies where we have an opportunity to advance clean energy. And right now, the commission is considering these energy rules. They have our first ever carbon standard, 100% carbon free by 2050. Obviously, we need much sooner, but getting that in the mix. And it does have some interim requirements, which was important to us, that it not just be pushed out to the end. It has an energy efficiency standard. We had a good one. It basically expired at the end of 2020. And so this ramps it up to 35% energy savings by 2030. And so that's important. There are some energy storage provisions in there. So bringing in the rooftop solar community as well. And then probably as importantly, it changes our integrated resource planning rules. And Matt mentioned integrated resource planning. And those, those resource plans really give you an idea of where the utilities are headed, and that process can help make it clear that renewables are the way to go. Especially when they do economic modeling, and that is something that we really pushed for this time around. But the rules themselves are kind of at a fragile place because there was the attack by the legislature on the commission and basically on the rules. And then the chair of the commission, Marquez Peterson, she is probably going to run for something else after her time on the commission. And so is also thinking about a Republican primary. And right now, probably thinking, I wonder how these energy rules will look for me in a Republican primary. So what we're trying to do is get say, hey, you voted for these in November. We need to keep moving with this. It's important economically for our state. And so getting some of the big and small business interests to really work with her. Commissioner Tovar has been wonderful. She's the newest commissioner. And O'Connor, I guess, is as new as she is, but he's not as wonderful as she is. And she's been doing a great job. She just filed a letter. She's been pushing back on Marquez Peterson and testified against the bills in the legislature. So right now, we really need them to act before mid-May, or they'll have to start the rulemaking over. And so we're trying to really push right now for that. So we have that. There are resource planning going on right now, an opportunity to really push. TEP, Tucson Electric Power, has a good resource plan, actually. We need to push APS a little bit on this. And then the transition, just an equitable transition. There's a docket for that, and this is focusing on communities, mostly where coal plants are being retired, including the Navajo Nation, Hopi, communities around St. Joe and St. Joseph and, or Joseph City, sorry, that was going back to my Michigan roots, Joseph City and those areas. So that's a little bit on it. O'Connor has been kind of odd on the commission. He says he doesn't think climate change is human, or humans are contributing to it. And but now he has prepared an amendment on the energy rules, so maybe he thinks they're gonna go. And I guess his comments since he's been on the commission have not been as awful as prior to him being on the commission. So I'll just say that. And I don't want to go too long. And Olson, Commissioner Olson is terrible, and he's also thinking about running for Congress. That's what you have to look at, is what, like, if someone is there to serve and do that job, you can tell. But when they're eyeballing, you know, oh, I'm going to run for Congress or whatever, that so affects what they do in that position and at the legislature and other places. But that we have some of that going on right now.
Other challenges, right? Well, I want to thank both Matt and Sandy for being here. Thanks, Ellen, for being our commentator, our facilitator today. It was an amazing program. And before everyone leaves, I just want to say, you know, how they say it takes a village, it takes a community, it takes a global community to make these changes. So if you haven't gotten involved with Democrats of the Red Rocks to help with this fight, we fought really hard to get those seats in the state legislature. We were not successful in 2020, but we have not stopped fighting. You can join Toby's groups with the Action Committee or Request to Speak. You know, we are going to start focusing on voter registration as soon as we can get out and start to knock doors. I think that we need to register Arizona Blue. I really think that we need to make sure that we have every single possible person that will vote Democrat registered to vote. That's the way we're going to make these changes. We need the blue trifectorate like they have in California and other states. We need our state legislature blue, and we need our governorship blue, which we'll have an opportunity to do in 2022. So please, if you haven't already joined in, please do, because every single person makes a big difference in this whole thing. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Have a wonderful Thursday. It's a beautiful day out there. Go visit the earth. Bye.